So let me get naked right up front. So, not literally. We are talking about the bottom line, not bottoms.
So perhaps it's no wonder then that 4 consultancies rank as the world's biggest marketing companies. So instead of Dentsu, Ogilvy, and BBDO dominating the list, we now see that the world's biggest marketing agencies are Accenture Interactive, PwC Digital Services, IBM iX, Deloitte Digital. Note, not the world's largest digital marketing companies. The world's largest marketing companies are digital.
Let me just give you some headlines. You probably know the mind looks something like this. You probably also know it's full of neurons. You may not know there's 100 billion of them, but you know there's a lot of them. You probably also know that the power is not in the neurons, but it's in the firing synapses, the fact that lemons are hot. You're probably also aware of this thing called cognitive biases, these seeming irrational behaviors that we have that actually can be attributed to long ago mental connections.
So ABN released their results about 2 weeks ago. And the issue that they're facing in developed markets is that beer consumption is declining because young people don't want to have hangovers. And besides, you can't have a hangover and be on Instagram the next day. So the issue here is that brands are not competing against each other. The issue is not Miller or Heineken for AB InBev. The issue is culture.
Public speaking rule number 1. Win your audience over as quickly as you can. Do you know you're all a bunch of cowards? This room is a courage-free zone, full of lily-livered scaredy cats and spineless wimps. You're nothing more than a bunch of cream puffs. Well, that's rule number 1, well and truly broken. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is precisely my point. We don't break enough rules.
But it's really time for the creative people to stand up and come to the table at the board level and at the CEO level, because artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to flatten the playing field for everybody. And there's going to be one thing left to chase for competitive advantage, and that's going to be creativity.
Okay, so in their manifesto of 1848, Marx and Engels wrote, "Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains." Now, looking at this fantastic gathering that we've got here, allow me to kick off by suggesting marketers of South Africa unite. You have nothing to gain but your credibility.
And then the noughties. The rise of the internet, people started to become a lot more connected, particularly in South Africa as well. National boundaries were starting to be eradicated purely because of the access of travel and the idea that people were starting to move between countries, which was great because there was this cultural convergence. And these were sort of topics that were going on at the time and people felt strongly about, both in a positive way and in a negative way. It created a lot of tension, particularly with the sense of nationalism.
The Human Development Index, ladies and gentlemen, is a measure of how well we are doing to preserve humanity across the globe. So this graph you see on the screen effectively tells you that we are increasing the level of wellness. So the graph goes up and to the right, which is a good thing. The sad thing is we're still the bottom of the pile. So Sub-Saharan Africa is still the lowest when it comes to the human development condition. When you overlay this particular graph with another very exciting curve that a lot of you may be aware of, and this is the acceleration of technology. It's Moore's law in real life. Moore's law says technology gets better and better and better. So when we were at the printing press to where we're at now from a 3D printing perspective, we're getting better at this technology thing.
Okay, so the client-agency relationship, is it a love affair or is it destined for divorce? There are certainly a number of similarities. So I want to suggest that it's time for a new narrative. I think that the marriage analogy is a limiting construct. And the reason why I think that is it suggests that compromise is necessary to keep each other happy.
The first thing that your customers really want that I'll share with you is quite simple. They actually want it all, right? There's nothing new about this. This is the human condition since Adam and Eve, since imperialism, since coveting your neighbor's car, and today it would probably be their iPhone. This is absolutely who we are.
What happens with Times Square, being told that it's the most expensive eyeball, a friend of mine put out a clothing brand and was very successful, and they paid $80,000 a week just to be in that space. Does it guarantee ROI? Does it mean people are going to run to the store and flush to go and buy that product? We don't know till you go, as marketers that are here, you go and put it to test.
We've heard about CPLs, impressions, reach, frequency, programmatic, bots, all this stuff. And actually, one observation before we start is just that we need to be very careful that with automation and data, that we don't become simpletons and actually ask people what they're talking about. Because the reality is a lot of people have no idea what they're talking about. So first observation is, if you hear CPL, CPCs, impressions, reach, frequency, ask that person to explain to you as if you were an alien or your grandmother what they mean.
Firstly, culture. We need to understand, as marketers, the mega trends existing in society today. From a category perspective, concept of monopoly beer is gone. There are more drinks products on our shelves than ever before, and we are competing not only for different tastes and different occasions, we're competing for different ideas. And finally, from a consumer perspective, we need to understand the values that are driving society today.
Ernst Rutherford was a chemist, and he had a group of chemists that worked with him. And they had this extraordinary challenge that they were dealing with, and they'd spent years and they just couldn't solve it. And eventually he said to his team, you know what? He said, let's just start looking differently. Let's actually just be fascinated by what we don't know. Let's be fascinated by our own ignorance and let's look for the anomalies. So you know what? Come to me every 2 days and just report back to me anything that's happening in the experimentation that's different to what you think it should be. So anything that shows up as anomalies. And they did this. They did this for a year. And Ernst Rutherford, who is known today as the father of nuclear physics, him and his team, after a year of being fascinated by their own ignorance, split the atom.
Dad goes on, I must say that brief thing was beautiful. Dad goes on to tell the story about a TV show that him and Mum were watching in the hospital when I was born. And it was a show called This Is Your Life. And it featured Muhammad Ali as it told the story of his life, as he was reintroduced to people who had made an impact on him over his then 37 years. He describes, Dad does, about how Ali broke down in tears as he met his grade school teacher he hadn't seen in 20 years. And that's the stuff about stories that gets me going, the way they make us feel. Interestingly enough, for boxing fans in the room, yeah, I thought so, actually. Interestingly enough, 78 was the year in which Ali became the first 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. Yet, it wasn't the stuff you'd expect that moved Ali. It was a lady who taught him at 6 years old that it was okay to dream big dreams.
This lady and her husband sell about, or buy 40 bags of 12.5 kg flour every single week. So 40 bags of a very well-known brand of flour, and they've never spoken to a brand person. They've never had a loyalty exercise that has rewarded them for buying it. They've never had someone trying to convince them to buy another brand. And when I asked them and I said, what is the biggest challenge to your business? They said, we have no guarantee. And the no guarantee was that the city of Joburg could remove them off that piece of pavement that they've been on for 12 years tomorrow. But the sad thing is that the no guarantee that happened recently was a listeriosis crisis, which meant that a large proportion of their business was destroyed by the fact that we had listeriosis in Poloni, and the marketing industry and the manufacturing industry did nothing to protect her or to help her weather that storm.
What we're here to talk about is something called chairman's folly. So what is this exactly? So I work at Nedbank. We sponsor the Nedbank Cup. I can imagine 12 years ago, when the conversation happened that let's sponsor the Nedbank Cup, what the conversation was. I'm a massive Kaizer Chiefs fan. Had I been there, out of going, I'm going to hand over a trophy to Kaizer Chiefs, let's sponsor, guys, when? I can imagine the conversations Pepsi was having when they decided to do some work with Justin Timberlake. Oh, bloody hell, we're going to be hanging out with Justin Timberlake. Let's do it. Why not? That's what Chairman's Folly means. And in fact, there's a South African brand that I'm not going to mention that sponsors cricket. The story is that the execs of that brand actually wanted to hang out with South African cricket players.
I said, if you could go over the last 10 years, look at every single industry. So look at cars, look at banks, look at beer, look at cell phones, and look at the common threads that made work great and the common threads that made work really terrible. What were they? A few months later, the agency comes back with a very, very extensive research. And what was quite interesting, that one of the number one things that really, when work and ad worked really well, there was food on the table. It was weird, there was food, but if there was chicken, it was even better.
Fundamentally, our jobs as marketers is to really bring emotion to the heart of our consumer. I'm going to ask a few people in the audience, what did you hear? What was the one thing you heard that the speaker said to you? Huh? Tell stories. Be more playful. Did you see I was more playful there? Did it work for you? Yeah. What else? Be brave. Did you hear that, guys? Understand the culture and tell the stories that our consumers want to hear.
Well, everyone, I must say, even if I had a mat and 2 tortoises and perhaps a poem up my sleeve, I don't think I could express my gratitude more, my gratitude and my pride for having you all here today and what's turned out to be a remarkable day. At the IMC, my philosophy, or our philosophy, is now about the business case for marketing. We're all about proving that marketing is business. I think if you can go to the next slide, I don't have a clicker. Marketing is business. So that's our first philosophy. And the second philosophy is that it's all about the youth. And you can imagine my delight at finding a naming sponsor in Nedbank who completely believes in those sentiments. So I'm hoping this is the beginning of a long relationship where we can do great things together. And then I'd just like to close with a quote from Martha Nussbaum. She said, "Nudity quickly becomes unremarkable when generally practiced." So thank you all for being here and see you next year. Thank you.